Hi, I'm Paul Lyndon Birtwell, and this is Reasonable Faith, Compelling Reason. Today, I am super excited to have with us the legend, who is Josh McDowell. Good morning, Josh.
Well, it's been a long time since I've been called a legend. You've been around as long as I have.
I've been around a while, yeah. Hey, can we start off with a question, if that's okay? And obviously we're an apologetics ministry, and I'd just love to ask you how apologetics has influenced your faith, your ministry, and how it's kind of shaped the way you think and how you do evangelism.
Well, my greatest objection to Christianity was that Christians had two brains. One was lost and the other was out looking for it. I truly believe Christians were walking idiots. And the reason I believe that, Christians could always tell me what to believe. Oh, they could tell me what to believe about Jesus, the Bible, the resurrection, everything. But I couldn't find any who could tell me why I should believe it intellectually. And so I kept rejecting it. And then I was challenged to examine it intellectually, which I thought was a joke. I really did. But they really ticked me off. Now, don't get me wrong. Everything those Christians were doing was appropriate. I was the problem. I had stuffed all that anger, bitterness, resentment down into my life. And when they said Jesus Christ, it came out like a volcano. And so they so irritated me, I said, okay, I'll accept your challenge. They got all excited, thought they had a convert. But I said, I'm not going to do it to prove anything. I'm going to do it to refute. Two things, the deity of Christ and the resurrection and the scriptures, three things. And so I set out to write evidence that demands a verdict against those Christian students and professors. Well, I ended up becoming one of them because I made a lot of money my first 2 years, and I traveled throughout the United States at the break of my second to third year of college, and went throughout the United States, England, Germany, France, Switzerland, and the Middle East. Gathering any evidence to write evidence that demands a verdict. And I was returning home, and I was sitting in a small museum library in London because I had to wait overnight to catch a flight. And I leaned back in my chair, and right in front of everyone, which was probably three people, right out loud in that library, I just said, it's true. It's true. It's true. And what I meant by that, I had concluded intellectually that I could hold the New Testament in my hands and say what I have is what was written down. And what was written down was true. Jesus did this, and Jesus said that. And that eventually brought me to asking the question, was what Jesus said true? It was true that he said it, but was it true what he said? And December the 19th, 1959 at 8:30 at night, I got alone with a friend, and I put it to the test and got, God, if you're God and Christ is your son, and if he died on the cross for me, as my mind tells me through the scriptures and all, then I want to trust him as my Savior and Lord, come into my life. And nothing happened. I mean, well, something did happen. I felt like I was going to vomit. I thought I was going to chuck my cookies. The moment I accepted Christ, I started to think, oh, no, Josh, have you made an emotional decision that you will later regret intellectually? And that scared me. But I found out that I'd made a true intellectual decision based on truth when I trusted Christ as my Savior and Lord, and I haven't looked back since. And that's been about 50 years.
And you said there that nothing happened when you made, like, the prayer of commitment. Did you, in the following days, weeks, months, did you see a change in your character, in your nature at all?
It was about 6 months. And what is interesting, when I started to see changes, it wasn't changes I was seeking after. I wasn't even thinking about them. But one of the biggest ones is I had a very short temper. Somebody look at me cross-eyed and I'd straighten them for them. And I found myself arising in that crisis where normally I get upset with people, I get impatient with them and lose my temper. I wasn't. And after a while I said, what in the world happened? And that's when I knew something had happened. And then I grew up hating my father.
Right.
because I believed he had killed my mother, destroyed my family, everything. And after I became a believer, I called my dad to meet him at a 50s diner in Battle Creek, Michigan, because I wanted to tell him how much I hated him and I never wanted to see him again, as I was a brand new believer. And so we met there, sat down, the waitress took order, walked off to the right, and I looked at my father to tell him how much I hated him. And I said, Dad, I've come here to tell you I love you. And I stopped. I don't know who was most surprised to hear it, my dad to hear it or me to say it. That's when I knew something significant had happened in my life. And it ended up, I led my father to Christ.
Wow.
But I didn't want to love him. Even after I became a Christian, I hated my dad so much I did not want to love him. Well, I ended up loving him into the kingdom. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But all these changes are not things that I sought after.
Yeah.
That's what is amazing to me, even to this day. Yeah.
So what was your first church experience like?
Probably my first church experience was, in spite of what the pastor said, I still believed in God. It was a very, very, very liberal congregational church in Union City, Michigan. And my mother would take me there and drop me off. She would never go. And I just couldn't believe it. I'd go to the Sunday school and everything, and they had like a lawyer teaching one class and others teaching them, and they couldn't answer my questions. And I just thought, this is absolutely ridiculous. And so I quit going. My mother dropped me off, and I'd sneak away and go down and get a chocolate milkshake at the favorite ice cream place, and then go back and meet her at the church when she was picking me up. So that was my first church experience. My second church experience was in the process of becoming a believer. It was a church called Factoryville Bible Church, a great church. But it became a stumbling block to me, because I would go there and the pastor, who was just a neat guy, preached the gospel. Fay Logan was his name. But when I would go in the evening, couples invite others over to their house, for dessert or something. And I would go there, and these people were the biggest gossips in the whole world. I mean, I would sit there, and all these women would do the whole evening is gossip about others. Oh, did you hear this about that? Mrs. So-and-so, do you know what she did? And it really became a barrier to coming to Christ. But the thing that made more sense to me was the gospel. And so I did come to Christ. But even though that was a fabulous church, a number of men and women in it were just gossips. And that turned me off.
Yeah.
I would have probably come to Christianity months earlier if it hadn't been for those people that gossiped. Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember.
Because I learned one thing years ago. When somebody will talk to you about others, they'll talk to others about you.
That's true.
That's always true. Always true. Yeah. And so when people talk to me about others, I walk away. Because I know they'll talk to others about me if I don't.
I had a very similar experience, I think, when I went to church, first of all, at the age of 16. I think the two things that really kind of shocked me was the amount of singing that people did. Like, what's all this singing about? I didn't kind of get the singing aspect of church, because most of the service was just singing.
Singing about the blood of Christ and everything else. Yesterday in church, sorry for interrupting you, but yesterday in church, I turned to one of the pastors next to me and I said, no non-believer here would understand any of these verses of these songs you're singing. Yeah. They wouldn't.
Nope.
Nothing wrong with singing those, but the blood of Christ, the blood of the Lamb, the sacrifice of the Lamb, nobody understands that. Yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, even the concept of singing, being a 16-year-old lad who went out and played football and hang around with his mates and gangs and stuff like that, to go into a place where you sing love songs to a guy called Jesus was very, very, very disconcerting. It was a very strange experience, very weird indeed. As I never sang before that.
Phrase it that way before, but I can see that.
Very weird. And the second thing was, as you said, they didn't answer my questions. When I asked a question, they would usually just say, like, don't be so rude as to question the pastor. It was that kind of feeling that you got. They may not have already said that, but it was that kind of thing. How dare you question the pastor on this topic? And they didn't have any answers. And that's when I kind of was introduced to your materials, your books, your videos, and you really helped me a lot. But yeah, I think that was a major problem for me becoming a new Christian.
Yeah. But yet, even though it's what appears to be negative things, it's what God uses in most of us to bring us to Christ.
Yeah.
So I'm not complaining.
Well, we're still here, right?
Yeah.